welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we know 2023 preview and prediction for the USC Trojans. Look at this coaching staff: Lincoln Riley, 66-13 record in 6 seasons as a head coach. Josh Henson, second year as the offensive coordinator, is also the O-line coach. And then Alex Grinch has been retained as the defensive play caller. This is his second year also, and he's also been with Lincoln Riley for a long time, starting from the Oklahoma days. Obviously, the biggest headline is just going to be, can the defense find a pulse to pair up with this elite offense? And speaking of this unit, Nick, they certainly lived up to expectations and even shattered it. I picked Caleb Williams to win the Heisman Trophy a season ago, but he did it in an even more exciting fashion, providing to be an incredibly elite improviser. He's great on the run, great arm talent, can make any throw, even off platform, good decision maker, quick diagnoser, excels on timing routes. He's a great leader also, 6'1", 215. This guy was incredibly fun to watch from a season ago, Nick. Caleb Williams obviously is pegged as the number 1 pick in the upcoming NFL draft. 52 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions, 4,500 passing yards. He was absolutely phenomenal all year long for this football team. If you look at his numbers in the 3 games they lost, it was a pretty staggering amount. What are your thoughts on Williams? What does he have to improve on, if anything? And really, what can he do this upcoming season where if he was already eligible for the draft, he would have been long gone?
Just stay healthy. That's all I got to say about Caleb Williams. Just stay healthy. Make sure you're healthy. Make sure you're fully 100% every single Saturday. That's all I have to say. The stats are ridiculous, right? 66% completion percentage, 4,500 yards passing, 42 touchdowns through the air, 5 interceptions, 382 yards on the ground, 10 scores. What more could you want of your quarterback? When he made the move to USC, I knew it was going to be a good move for him following his head coach out west. He got a lot of weapons out in LA. Some people are cautious. Some people in the community wanted to see it play out first. You obviously jumped right into it, said he'd win the Heisman. I didn't say I agreed with you, but I thought, of the players available, I thought he was probably in that top 3 range in terms of Heisman. I had Will Anderson as my Heisman. Obviously, that was a bit of a miss, but I thought, Bryce Young, Will Anderson, Caleb Williams is kind of someone in that little area was probably going to win it. You went out and nailed it with Caleb Williams. Props to you as always with that. As a great pick. Williams is a fantastic player. Obviously, if he doesn't get hurt in the Pac-12 title game, they could be in the playoff last year. That's the sort of impact he has. When he was really lacked the mobility, it became a problem. I think the mobility is very underrated. Very underrated. The fact that he can move on the ground. The 10 scores shows that. I like what he can do with his feet. Great in the pocket, good improviser. A play sometimes there'll be plays that look like they're totally broken, but Williams finds a way to just completely adjust and make it work. That's why he's going to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft next year, and so many teams are looking forward to drafting him. There's so much talent here with Williams. What is not to love? I think he's in line for another great season. He should probably put those numbers up again this year, roughly around that 4,500 yards passing. 40-ish touchdowns, potentially pushing to 45. I think you can kind of get in that range. I think 10 on the ground again, maybe push it closer to 500. I want to see more balance overall with this offense. I'll highlight that later. I want to see more balance on the ground. So, kind of push to 500 on the ground, 5,000 all-purpose yards, certainly, and a lot of scores. Caleb Williams is a star in college football, and Lincoln Riley has his guy right here.
Third in points, yards, and passing yards per game from a season ago. The offense put up electric numbers. Look what they did in the portal. Obviously, last year they had very good. They lost 8 players this cycle, 6 of them at wide receiver, and they added 5, 3 up front. All those guys are going to start. We'll talk about momentarily. They do return a total of 6 starters. 3 of the top 4 pass catchers are back. Jordan Addison departs. It was 2 elite interior offensive linemen, and left tackle Bobby Haskins departs. Looking at these receivers, though, Dorian Singer comes over from Arizona, a player who's dangerous in the open field with strong hands, great at locating the ball, does very well working outside the numbers. The Wildcats got absolutely hammered by the Trojans in this portal, and Singer was the king of the crop there. Taj Washington, a former Memphis transfer, great open field runner, good high point, great downfield threat, and explosive playmaker who has a great burst after the catch. Mario Williams, a dynamic slot option, paired him up with Brendan Rice, 6'3", 205. Really good size, allows him to be a physical imposer, great hands and speed. And then also have Zach Branch, number 7 overall recruit, 5-star true freshman, elite game-breaking speed, terrific in space. Makai Lemon, 50th overall recruit in this past class, dynamic athlete, also has good body control, good lateral agility, which allows for some great separation. This is a great receiving core, Nick, from top to bottom. They have plenty of guys that can hurt you on a weekly basis. And last year, they didn't have great production really from any one individual guy. It was everybody. Collectively, this unit had 4 guys put up 600-plus yards. No one top 900. But top to bottom, Nick, they had plenty of guys that produced. It's going to be that same way this year. And again, true freshman Zach Branch is destined to get involved. This is a scary group of weapons for Caleb Williams.
There's so much talent here on this offense. Fantastic wide receiving core. Taj Washington, 785 yards receiving last year, 15.7 yards per catch for him, 6 scores. Mario Williams, 5 scores for him, 631 yards receiving, 15.8 yards per catch for him. Dorian Singer comes over from Arizona, grabs the best player from the Wildcats, just keeps him in conference and makes the move. Fantastic piece. Brendan Rice, 611 yards receiving, 15.7 yards per catch, 4 scores for him. Michael Jackson III is also on the roster. He had 236 receiving yards last year in 8 games, 4 scores for him. The true freshman talent, Zach Branch, Makai Lemon, fantastic talent there. Mario Williams, all over the board. There's so much talent here top to bottom. This is an incredible offense. That's not even highlighting Austin Jones, who's an incredible back to get in the backfield.
Yeah, Austin Jones really had to take over late in the year when Adai went down. Great strength. He barrels through arm tackles. He was a good outside zone runner when given the keys late there in the year. Very solid pass catcher also. Strong, compact lower half for his counterpart, Marshawn Lloyd, who they picked up from South Carolina. Good balance through traffic. Good blend of rushing and passing game skills, quick feet in a burst. And a Relic Brown, he's destined to get more involved this year also. He was a true freshman 5-star from a year ago. He had 227 yards. He had 6 total touchdowns. That run game you talk about, that's really from a product of not attempting as many runs. They obviously run a lot of passing plays. Why would you not when you have Williams throwing the football, 473 attempts, 5 yards per attempt on the season, about 34 attempts per game, that is. And that was one of the criticisms I had of Ohio State coming in the last year, is that they did not run the ball enough. I think it was only 2 games of 40-plus attempts. The same thing can be said for USC. They certainly don't run the ball enough, which can certainly be a bit of a backdraw. And much like that Buckeye team, Nick, the defense wasn't great, and you needed to help them out a little bit by slowing down. USC, same thing, only 2 games of 40-plus rushing attempts. Let's see that number bump up a little bit, and I guarantee it's going to do, magical things for a defense, in the grand scheme of things.
Certainly nitpicking here by complaining about the running attack. When you look at the numbers, right, points per game 3rd, yards per game 3rd, pass yards per game 3rd, run yards per game 53rd, right? That is a drop off. Obviously, it's not anything atrociously bad like Mississippi State's, pass yards to run yards. So there certainly is a lot to work with here. I think there's a lot of talent. Austin Jones, a fantastic back. The 5.2 yards per carry and the 5 scores for him is a good number, and they make some moves in the portal as well, and they bring in a great piece in Marshawn Lloyd. So I think it's a great base right now, but I want to see that number hit 200 yards per game on the ground. I think it certainly is achievable with this if you kind of change up some of the play calling a little bit. I think 200 yards per game on the ground is a good balance because they still have to find a way to keep their defense off the field if possible. This defense has gotten a lot better, but I don't trust them fully, so I would like to see them kind of balance it, burn some time off the clock, and run the ball a little bit more, get that attempts per game certainly up.
Looking at the offensive line, they certainly had some big-time players from a year ago, especially on the interior. Justin Dietrich is the only one back from that group. Does a good job anchoring versus bigger linemen. Good puller, showcasing some ability and some speed. Understands angles, some heavy feet at 6'2", 305. And no team probably did better, maybe the Gators on the offensive line, or maybe Miami when it comes to the transfer portal. Michael Tarquin from Florida, 6'5", 320. He was great for the Gators, especially as a pass blocker. Only 5 pressures allowed, a phenomenal number in that conference. Jarrett Kingston, 6'5", 302. He was great at left tackle for Washington State. Just as good at guard, where he's likely going to slot in. Some impressive versatility there. Emmanuel Prograna, 6'6", 312. A late add from Wyoming. He completely thrived his first year for the Cowboys. Jonah Moyham allowed 0 sacks and over 1,000 snaps played last year. USC, they had the benefit of being completely healthy during the entire regular season up front. Late in the year, they did not have that privilege, but mainly at right tackle is where Moyham slided in last year, got some time in at right guard. Again, yes, the great health they had leads to some of the depth this year and the experience being a little iffy, but overall, top to bottom, the potential is great for this O-line. And they don't have too many strong responsibilities with a playmaker at quarterback. They certainly give up 1 too many sacks, certainly a bigger number they should have. And then again, like you said, setting the tone up front and running the ball is certainly something they need to improve on. Physicality is something that we do need to monitor because against Utah, they could not run the ball one bit. But I think this O-line rounds out an A-plus offense.
I like Dietrich a lot. I think he's a very solid player at center. I think what he can do is good. Tarquin, huge ad, 6'5", 320, fantastic size. Good piece to put in at right tackle. Pergron late in the cycle, 6'6", 312. Incredible size, 6'6", 312. I love that a whole lot. Good hands on him from Wyoming. I think this is a great player to add into the portal. Good offensive line. I think as long as they can get to that 200 yards per game on the ground mark, I think this is an A-plus easily. And that's really the only One thing I'm nitpicking here is the rushing yards per game. If they can get that number a little bit higher, I think this offense will be flying, putting up a ton of points. Sky's limits here. Caleb Williams, fantastic player. A+ offense, certainly.
And that's really the only thing that needs to improve is the running game dominance. Only 200-plus yard games versus 5 opponents on the ground last year. So I definitely think that's going to be improved this year with some of the revampments on the offensive line. A+ for both of us on this side of the ball. And obviously what it's going to come down to is what they can do on defense. This was just a drastically disappointing unit last year, Nick. They couldn't even find one stop if they needed it. They gave up 47 against Utah, 46 against Tulane, 43 in the first game against Utah, a game where, Dalton Kincaid had like 16 receptions, 300-plus yards at the tight end position. Absolutely ridiculous, right? This defense certainly, in that second game against Utah, they were actually getting stops. It's not going to be reflective on the scoreboard by any means, but they were getting stops, timely manner as well, forcing some turnovers in that game. And the offense with Caleb Williams hurt just could not maneuver it, so it certainly needs to be accounted there. The biggest excitement for this defense, though, is once again they did a lot of work on the portal side. I was thinking maybe Jim Leonard would come in and replace Alex Grinch. The loyalty here for Lincoln Riley, it's going to stay true at least for 2023. They lost 12 players in the portal, added 10, 5 of them on the D-line to pair up with the return of 8 starters. They obviously lose 2 elite players and 2 below 2, Mekhi Blackman. This team snagged 19 interceptions, Nick, 6 in FBS and takeaways. Overall, what were your thoughts on this defense? Who they had 3 elite players in total: Blackman, Tui below 2, and then Bullock at the safety position. But the rest of the unit was just awful. And so I just kind of want to gauge your thoughts on what can they do this year before we dive into some of these individual players, because I'm very excited for the potential of this defense this year.
It seemed like every week we talked about USC. The one thing we worry about was, hey, can the defense keep up this week? Can the defense put it together? They were not able to. They struggled against Tulane. They struggled against Utah. And that really ended up being their ultimate downside and what cost them a trip to the playoffs in Lincoln Riley's first year. We talked about what would they do. Jim Leonard might be a good move. There were some rumors about that potentially. Leonard does not end up going to USC. They return Grinch, which I think is fine. I think he's a good play caller. But they are losing some seriously talented pieces. Tui Pelotu is a tough loss, so for sure. Mekhi Blackman is a very tough loss as well. He had 3 interceptions. I mean, he was 12 pass breakups. Blackman was fantastic for them last year, so losing those 2 certainly concerns me. I think returning Kalen Bullock is a very nice highlight. They made some work in the portal. They brought in a lot of pieces. Obviously, they had to revamp this front 7. Basically, they wanted to bring in so much talent. The secondary didn't worry me as much as the front 7. So I think this is definitely a concern. 29.4 points per game is not acceptable, right? You need to get that number lower. It's just not acceptable. Got to be in the 20, closer to 20, maybe even the teens, really, if you want to have success and win a national championship here. I think this defense has to step up. I'm cautiously optimistic. I feel better about this defense than I did last year based off the portal work, but I'm still concerned. I think you agree with that statement.
Yeah, and diving into this portal work, obviously the run defense was just awful all year long. 223 allowed against Utah in the Pac-12 title game, 305, 9 yards per attempt against Tulane. That's just horrible. 5 adds in the portal. Bear Alexander, a player I figured would get on the field as an X5-star for Georgia, had 2 TFL, 1 sack in the Natty. Some things happened with him and that coaching staff that led to his departure. Impressive quickness, great pursuit for his size of 6'3", 305. Good at stacking and shedding in the run game. Figures to be an immense tone setter for this run defense. Jack Sullivan, a versatile player, was a good tackler. Solid run defender for Purdue. Anthony Lucas, unique athlete for being 6'5", 290. Wasn't all that great for Texas A&M in limited snaps. Still a former high-end recruit with some great upside. He had a really good spring ball as well. Kyon Barrs, I wanted to get him from Arizona. As a USC fan, we were able to get him 6'3", 310. Good production for the Wildcats. Great experience and skill to anchor the nose. Tyrone Talini was a good run stopper. He was a transfer they had last year from Kansas State. Solomon Tuilapupu, he's improved a great deal in his first season. In this position was last season, so he certainly has a lot to continue to learn. And then to kind of round things off, number 1 recruit Corey Foreman still looking to find his mark. This defensive line has drastically improved this offseason along with some key returnees. Corey Foreman's football IQ, snagging the interception against UCLA late in the year, was obviously a highlight for this defense. I'm very excited for the potential up front, Nick, because they've completely revamped this unit. It's nothing but transfers, and the one guy who's not a transfer, a former number 1 recruit, and then Bear Alexander from Georgia. That physicality he brings to the table is going to be immense. He's going to be a highly impactful player here for the Trojans.
Bear Alexander is a great player to pick up from huge ad in the portal, 6'3", 305, fantastic player. Could potentially start in the future at Georgia. He heads west to greener pastures. I think it's fantastic for him. He's a very talented player to have. Barrs, a very good player, great production at Arizona. Like him at nose. Peloto as well, stepping up, and an X1 number one player, Corey Foreman. He's ready to hit his stride. I think he's going to have a huge breakout year. I'm excited for him. This defensive line's good. Jack Sullivan, another great piece to add from Purdue. So overall, they hit the portal. Like I said, they had to address the defensive line, and especially the stopping the run. That was the big issue. They could not stop the run. I mean, like you said, Tulane and Spears absolutely dominated them in that bowl game. So they got to find a way to have a pulse on run defense. When you have a guy like Barry Alexander in the middle there, and Bars as well at nose tackle, I think it's a very good spot for this team. I think there's a very good front seven, especially front four here.
And it's also got the progression is going to be contingent on this linebacking core. They weren't very good themselves. One of the biggest things I said coming in the last year is this defense just needed to learn how to play football again. Good fundamentals, good technique, and they were kind of iffy in that area. Mason Cobb, another player who arrives from Oklahoma State, fundamentals are not good. They drastically need help, but he is a high energy player. That was a good pass rusher when utilized. Brings leadership and had some great numbers that are on screen from a season ago for the Pokes. Eric Gentry, he had a tough season, especially with health, but still has a unique size of 6'6", 200. A great leader. Same goes for Shane Lee. Played a lot, but wasn't good in coverage. Wasn't really an enforcer for him. Rayshawn Davis has made some strides, has become stronger, more physical to kind of pair up with some of those good movement skills he possesses. And then high-end four-star Tackett Curtis. He's expected to find his way on the field in some capacity. Great speed. Kind of like the D-line, the linebacking group is a much improved room. Like I said, this front seven, the potential is, pretty high for this unit. Very excited to see what they do. What are your thoughts on this linebacking core, who certainly has an interesting collection of players, but all these guys certainly had plenty of struggles last year at the respective teams?
Gentry had a lot of struggles last year, but he did record 71 total tackles in the end, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. You want to see more of Gentry. There's a lot of potential with him. Very talented piece. Good to have back in the locker room. Tough season, struggle with health, but I think he's a good player. I want to see him fully healthy and be able to play this year. Mason Cobb, good player to add. I like him a lot. Very excited. Shane Lee as well has potential. He didn't play a whole lot, but he's got some potential on the bench there. I think this front seven has improved. They made the moves they needed to. We kept saying defense was the problem, and Lincoln Riley must have heard us, because he went out and he got some pieces from the defense, and that was certainly big for him to add those pieces.
And the secondary wasn't much better. They gave up 300 plus yards in 3 out of the 4 games at the end of the year, and the only game they didn't give up 300 was 234 to Tulane on only 8 completions. So they absolutely got railed by the big plays, Nick. Not good one bit. The amount of passing touchdowns they gave up last year, 25 of them. Compared to 19 interceptions, that's the biggest concern with this football team. Is last year they were first in turnover margin by quite wide margin. They had a margin of 21. They only lost 7 of them on offense. 28 total takeaways. That was the one thing that really kept this football team afloat, especially in the UCLA game. Week after week, people kept saying that USC turnovers are going to dry up, and they never did. But that's something that I think you cannot continue to bank on, and that's going to be true for this secondary. 19 interceptions is going to be hard to outdo. Despite giving up a lot of yards, plenty of open space against opposing offenses, they were able to locate the ball very often throughout the year. Christian Roland Wallace, another one of those highly coveted Wildcat transfers. He was a willing run defender, does a good job using the slide line to kind of track some wide receivers. Good and press with a strong punch. Good physical presence at 6', 194. Kalen Bullock was elite in coverage, a great tackler, impressive length and leaping ability. Great overall athletic ability, has elite ball skills. Bullock, he's obviously going to contend for an All-American team nationwide. Overall, communication just needs to improve. Playmaking was actually a big plus, but again, they still got absolutely carved up. Jacoby Covington was pretty solid towards the back end of the year at corner. He's starting to get up speed. Sierra Wright, Jalen Smith, all garnered some good experience last season. Christian Pierce had a strong spring. Traquan Fagans comes over from Alabama. And then 2 other guys in Bryson Shaw and Max Williams. They're, quite poor in their own right next to Bullock. 2 high-end recruits from last year's class in Zion Branch and Damani Jackson battled health as freshmen. They're ready to compete. Top to bottom, Nick, this defense has a lot of new faces that figures get involved this year. But again, like I said, if those turnovers really do start to dry up, this could be a tough year if we don't see improvement on this defense.
Certainly could be a problem if the turnovers go away. I think Bullock's a very good piece to return. 5 interceptions for him last year, 48 total tackles. Big numbers from him. I like Bullock a lot. Have really good piece to return. The size of him is good, 6'3", 180. I like that a lot. Some of these guys they bring in, Zion Branch, Damari Jackson, these are freshmen that are ready to play, I think. Bryson Shaw as well is a good. Fagans from Bama, very solid piece to add. So I think the turnovers got to stay. They got to find a pulse in the run defense. They can do that, and this defense can step up and keep that points per game total down. I mean, that points per game at 29.4 points. Closer to 20, I think this team will be very good position going into the season.
The staff has done a great job of beefing up this defense. Good depth and quality options at all 3 levels now after a really good offseason. And again, some of those guys like Branch, Jackson, Tackett Curtis, a 4-star, and then Bear Alexander, a 5-star transfer. I think this is a defense I'm gonna give a B to, just because I think everything needs to improve, especially the fundamentals. The numbers were awful a season ago, but I'm very excited for the potential this year. I'm very happy as a fan of what they were able to do with this unit. I think top to bottom, there's some really impressive pieces here, and I think this defensive line, they're gonna be in for a really big season. I love those pieces; they all match together. But Alex Grinch has got to get these guys pointed in the right direction. Something he never really did at Oklahoma. The talent obviously was never really there either. It's a lot better here at USC, so things have to change immediately. And if they don't, and he sticks around, Lincoln Riley's tenure is going to be completely tarnished.
I agree. They got to find a pulse on defense here. I think they've done the work in the offseason that they needed to do, but they got to be able to use this defense to produce. You can't be going shootouts week in, week out. Certainly this offense will score a whole lot of points, but it will put a lot less pressure on Williams and co. if they don't have to be in a shootout and have to get points every single drive. It's tough when your offense is constantly on the field and put up points like that and play at a pace for the game. I think the defense needs to step up and be able to produce to get this team into the playoff.
Looking at that preview and prediction, the offense is elite, led by the Heisman winner. The rich got richer with the ads in the portal, matched with some recruiting gems, one of the nation's deepest receiving rooms, while the starting line is also amongst the country's strongest. Defense is very exciting, as if they've built this team up in the trenches, and the D-line can all of a sudden be a tone setter for this team. The linebacking group really needs to improve, which seems imminent with a year under their belt. Same goes for the secondary, but it's very concerning how poor they were, despite having two elite football players in Blackman and Bullock. This unit, I think, needs to improve by at least 20%. I don't know what that means. 20% yards less? Points? I don't know. They just need to be 20% better, I guess, in terms of energy and overall fundamentals. This is a legit natty favor as a USC fan. No prediction from me. I did have them in the playoff a year ago, and they came up just shy, so I don't think there was any bias there that was involved. I would pick this team probably to make the playoffs again. Nick, you have them at 12-0. Obviously, this first half of the year, complete cakewalk. They should be able to get the job done. Look at the back half of the year. This is interesting. At Notre Dame, they host Utah. At Cal, that's a team we talked about could certainly spoil someone's season this year. They do get the, great hostings of Washington and UCLA. Sandwiched in between there is a trip to Athens Stadium. The back half of the schedule is incredibly tough, Nick. I'm shocked you didn't pick them to lose a game. One thing that does need to be talked about is the bye week, though. They play week 0, which allows them to have a off week before a potential Pac-12 title game. If they're 12-0, going into a week off and then the Pac-12 title game, this team's going to have a great shot at winning the national championship.
And that's exactly the reason why I picked them to go undefeated and go to the playoffs. I think that bye week is huge, very important. Yeah, the back half of the schedule is certainly tough, but I think they benefit with the home draws, Utah, Washington, UCLA, all at home. Huge benefits for me. I think that's great. At Notre Dame, tough, certainly a tough place to play. They're going to be loud in South Bend. I think they're going to be excited for that game. They would obviously love to beat their rival and knock them out of playoff contention. So that one's a good one to circle. That's the one of the 6 here I think is the most likely to lose, is the one at Notre Dame. But at Oregon, if Oregon comfortable with Bo Nix is having a good season, it's certainly possible Oregon could be a tough out on the road. Overall, I think there's just too much talent in this offense not to pick this team 12-0. I think Lincoln Riley is a fantastic coach, one of the best in college football. Last year we said they go to the playoffs, they fell just short, and quite frankly, if Caleb Williams did not get hurt in the Pac-12 title game, they should have been in the playoffs. They would have been in the playoffs. So I think this year is the year they break through that glass ceiling. Last year in the Pac-12, they get one last Pac-12 title and one trip to the playoff in the Pac-12. I think this team is so talented. Yeah, the defense concerns me a lot, certainly, but I think the secondary is not as. I think the secondary is fine. I think the front seven's where it concerns. Yes, it's a lot of moving pieces, and I've always said on this show that I don't like when teams bring in a ton of transfers. They don't have a whole lot of time together. When you have the transfers they brought in, and a guy like Barry Alexander, who's such an X factor on the defensive line coming over from Georgia, I think the sky's the limit with the team. I think the coaching is great, and I think this team should be in the playoffs here. I think if they don't go 12-0 and make the playoffs, it really is a disappointment at this point for me. Playoff lock, but if they don't make the playoffs, disappointing. Certainly got to talk about the early tenure of Lincoln Riley. If they go 2 years and they really blow it late in the season.
September 30th at Colorado is one to highlight also. They're, I think, 19-0 all time against the Buffaloes. They've never lost to them. This is going to be their final crack at them for a long time. Deion Sanders looking to make a pop early in his tenure. I think that's one that certainly we should note, Nick. I think it's going to be an interesting game, an opportunity for them to kind of be a tone setter for that program early in September for Deion in prime time and all those guys. 12-0 for me. I think the schedule in the back half is very tough. Like you said, we'll see what happens, though.
Absolutely. I think it's an exciting USC team. There's so much talent here. I think USC fans should be excited. This team has all the talent in the world, and they don't make the playoffs here. I think you got to talk about disappointment.
Come here for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me to talk about Lincoln Riley and his Trojans.
Absolutely excited for this high-fire offense to get back on the field.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.